Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
Today's guest is no ordinary healer. He's a brain-based chiropractor turned spiritual futurist who spent over 30 years pioneering the fusion of neuroscience and sacred wisdom. Dr. Dion is the author of 5 powerful books and a global guide in awakening Christ consciousness. His mission? Nothing less than helping humanity co-create a reality rooted in infinite love, light, and divine purpose. Get ready to expand your mind and elevate your soul. This is a conversation that you don't want to miss. How's it going, Mr. Doctor?
Fantastic. Get excited. It's a great day to be alive. We like to say it's a great day for a great day.
That's right. So how'd you get on this path?
It's just, I've always kind of been spiritually driven. I grew up in New York. So I went to Catholic school. So being immersed in just religion from a young age, I've always kind of had a great relationship with God, if you like to say. So I've always prayed at an early age. We're talking about 5, 6 years old. I was really spiritually driven, more religious at that time. As I got older, it kind of shifted over to more of a spiritual minded approach. But yeah, it's just grown over the years, and I'm a person who's just a reader, and so I don't know. I probably read. I would say, I'd say hundreds of books, definitely 500 books or so, just on self-improvement, spirituality, health and healing. So just tapping into that, we realized that God or consciousness, universal. I like to say omniversal consciousness always helps us get into the path and living a life that we always desire.
So what books inspired you the most?
I've read so many books. Let me see. What would be the most? Of course, the Bible. I read the Bible literally 3 times in high school, front to back. So the Bible was a book that really helped me to tap in and really understand the spiritual principles and how to live. And so the Bible was the first book that really, really helped me get on that path of going inside and understand. Because once you read, like I tell folks, you read the Bible front to back and not just, a lot of times when you go to church, they kind of give you quotes, right? Verses. And, sometimes that's kind of why I kind of moved away from church. After you read the Bible, the way it's supposed to be read as a story, you realize it's a lot in between the lines that you miss when you go to church and they bounce around and talking about Isaiah and Job and Jeremiah and, New Testament, Old Testament. So I would say the Bible kind of led me on this path. And then, of course, like I said, I've read, hundreds of books. I'm trying to think about the one recently that I've read that really, really impacted me. I'm trying to think about a recent book because I buy probably about 2 or 3 books every month, right? So it's just a constant kind of evolution and ascension into learning more about myself. So let me think about a book that I've read recently. I just looked over here in my small library in my small studio over here in Singapore. So it's a book called You Are the Way, all right, by a guy named I think it's Elmer Locker Jr. It's a guy that's on YouTube right now, and it really just talks about how you are God, you're a vessel of God, and that the world is a spiritual projection that we create. Right. And we have control. We are the co-creators of our life. And so it kind of goes into a lot of Neville Goddard's philosophies, law of assumption. Right. So that's one that I've really been tapped into, kind of just, projecting the future that I want to have. And also really the emotional aspect which is really one of the secrets of co-creating and creating the reality of your dreams.
Yeah, I've heard of that guy. Isn't he the one that says that Neville was his uncle or something like that?
Well, his uncle worked with Neville. So his uncle was a private student of Neville Goddard. So his thing is really about the world of assimilation. That's kind of his philosophy, that the world is, and it really is, right? It's like The Matrix. So if you've seen the movie The Matrix, right? I tell folks, The Matrix is one of my favorite movies, probably my favorite movie, just because of its esoteric messages, and a lot of the things that I think were kind of put in the script are really based on a lot of reality and a lot of literal principles of how the world operates.
It's true. Well, Neville Goddard was born here in Barbados, and there's a
Was he?
yeah, there's a
He
lot.
was. Yes, he was. Exactly. He does share a lot about Barbados and how he traveled. Yeah, because I read his story as well.
Yeah,
Oh, nice.
there's a lot of people who, well, older folks who still kind of remember, and they were like, he was he was definitely like on a different level to others. Like, he would just see things and know things from the time he was very young.
Mm,
Yeah,
nice. So he was almost like a Edgar Casey type of figure
it really
down
seems
there.
that way. I just I have to wonder, I guess, what has made people lose touch with that side of themselves to the extent that even when he was a kid, people were like, "Oh, he's a weird kid," like because that was quite some time ago.
Yeah. Well, it's the programming. I grew up in New York, but my family's from North Carolina. So, a lot of time we have a hive mentality. And so after generation of being taught traditional things, when we kind of tap into, we would say this is more of an ancient energy, right? Because people go to Atlantis and the Egyptians had more of an intimate connection with consciousness. We kind of touch on the importance of consciousness. When we talk in consciousness, we're talking about God, right? We're talking about the awareness that creates all things. We don't talk about those things, right? We talk about, religion, and we talk about figures instead of talking about, that connection, right? We could talk about the Native Americans, that connection, right? The Aborigines, that connection with nature, with life. And so, yeah, so of course they would look at him and, I'm sure Barbados at that time, I think he was in the early 1900s, correct? Right. So they were kind of, evolving and becoming an industrial nation. And, I'm pretty sure they looked at this kid and said, "What is he talking about? We're moving in this direction. He's saying some different stuff." So that's amazing. Yeah, Barbados. Okay, and help me out because I've been in the Caribbean, but Barbados is located where in the Caribbean?
Barbados is the one that looks like a little chicken nugget, and it's off the island chain to the right,
Of
right at the bottom. So,
right at the bottom of Puerto Rico. Is it?
no,
Was it next to?
there's like the whole island chain. So you got like Puerto Rico and stuff is up here. I know it's near
Mm-hmm.
for you, and then it goes down that way, and there's that whole long island chain. So above us is
Mm-hmm.
like St. Vincent or something, but we're slightly off to the right of that. And then beneath us is like Trinidad and South America and stuff like that.
Oh, really? Oh, okay, okay. You guys are.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. So, yeah. Okay. Nice. And you were born in Barbados.
yeah, I was born here. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. So, tell me about how you even got into being a chiropractor, and why did you want to do that, and then how did that lead you to practicing the spiritual healing that you're doing?
Well, chiropractic, when I was younger, I was very active in athletics. So I played a lot of sports. But unfortunately, I was very injury prone. So I had a lot of injuries even before I graduated high school. So when I went to college, now this is back in now you're a young man, but this is back in the black and white days, we'll say, right? So this is early 90s when I got to college. I was playing sports and I had got a serious injury at the end of my freshman year in college. And so at that time, my family, we didn't have insurance. I basically tore my ACL, right? So I tore my ACL, and this was like my third major injury and my second serious knee injury. So after doing rehab on it for about, and I had rehab before, so I understood, how long it took for the body to heal. But this rehabilitation was taking really long and I just wasn't getting results. So when I went back to the doctors, they were like, "Well, we did the surgery. We can do another surgery, or we can give you some pills, or maybe we can give you some injections." So as a 19-year-old, it didn't seem like it was very practical, right? I didn't really see how that was going to help me live a great life, get back to playing. I used to play basketball at the time, get back to playing basketball and just, get back to just having fun with my friends, competing. And so I have a real close friend in class, and he kind of mentioned, hey, you should go see my uncle. And I was like, your uncle, what does your uncle do? Is your uncle like orthopedics? Like, what's he do? Physical therapist? He said, no, he's a chiropractor. And he was a guy who actually, I went to college in Los Angeles, so University of Southern California. And he just said a chiropractor. So now this is in the early 90s. Like, I didn't even know what that was. I was like, a chiropractor? What does a chiropractor do? Like, I had to actually go to the school library. Now, our library is massive, like literally like 100,000 books in the library. One small book on chiropractic back then, right? So I read that, and it didn't say anything about sports, and it said the spine, and it was just very intriguing. So long story short, I wound up going to see him a couple of months later, and because I had been taking pills and I was at a really bad reaction. I lost like 10, 15 pounds, but my hair was falling out. Now I'm 19. So I really got, disdain for kind of like the traditional method. And then it kind of happened to me when I was younger, like 13, 14. I had serious side effects from taking the meds. And so I was really turned off of that. So I went and treated with the guy, and he kind of explained to me how chiropractic work, where your brain, your body, everything goes through your spine. And it was just very, no drugs, no surgery. So that really piqued my interest right there. And I actually started school as an engineer, but had moved over after my injury into physical therapy. So my major was physical therapy at the time. So I was already kind of geared toward healing the body and trying to figure out the mechanics of how it worked. But this approach really resonated with me. And to touch on that, when you're in school, sometimes you're lost, right? So when I was 20 years old, going back to my relationship with God, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, right? So I was an engineer. I went from electrical engineering to civil. I was at the point of thinking about, maybe I'll do aerospace. I didn't really know. And so I prayed to God one day. And I said, God, I need your help. Like, I don't really have a direction. I was like a sophomore in school at this time. And I said, help me out. I want to do something that helps people and that I could never get tired of. And it would always be exciting and inspiring. And I don't know. So talked to my friend, led me to the chiropractor. And literally when I was treating with him, I went with another friend to a career fair. And it was a chiropractic school there. And they were, talking about chiropractic and kind of educate. So being that I was a sports guy, I got into physical therapy to really treat athletes. And I said, you guys treat athletes? Do you have a sports component? It was like, yeah, sure. We definitely treat athletes. And from there, even though the guy that I went to treated athletes, I didn't know they had a program that, specifically helped athletes. And so once I found that out, then I transferred my major over, and I was almost finished my program. I only had like 2 semesters left in physical therapy, which is one of the top programs. I think it might be the top program in America right now to this day, Southern California. Switched over to chiropractic, and ever since then, I've been on this path. So that's literally almost 30 plus years ago.
Okay. So, was that your biggest challenge, or I'm just trying to get ideas to, what are some of the big moments in your life that really shaped you as a person?
Well, that shaped me. Once I, and that's kind of how I always, like you said, how'd you get to Singapore? Well, I'm very intuitive. I can really tell folks, some folks pray to God. I really hear the voice of God. And as I got older, I realized it's your I am awareness, really. It's your inner voice that leads you. But yeah, that shifted my trajectory, because once I had a focus as a young man, I was 21, 22 at that time. And I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And it just kind of led me, on this journey, we would say, and I always tell folks, I don't really see things as challenges. I just look at them as lessons and blessings. All right. So, yeah, that was a major, major shift for me, saying, okay, I'm going to do it, because that's kind of like never got it, right? That's a very alternative philosophy and field, especially back in the 90s. Like most of my friends and families didn't even know who the chiropractor was. So when I said, I'm going to leave this prestigious school and go do this in this little chiropractic college, people are like, what are you going to do that for? Like, why would you do that? Just graduate here and do this thing, right? So that, in having faith in God, that God was going to lead me in the direction I needed to go. And we've been on this journey ever since. And then in that journey, we've had, changes because, I do more brain-based holistic healing, and chiropractic is very alternative, but it's not so integrative like that, so, that's been just a blessing for me, just finding, just believing in my intuition and following my path, which is what I always do. And what I would recommend that all people do, if they can hear the voice in their head and not hear everybody else's voices in their head.
Right. So you've gotten these books under your belt. It's 5 of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What really drove you to write those books, and what messages are you conveying with them?
Well, I mean, we're going to always kind of get this theme, right? It's always, spiritually driven, right? I didn't plan on writing books. I didn't even really the first book I wrote, which was in, I believe, 2012. It just was a kind of like a knowing, like God was saying. And when I say God, we'll talk about whatever you want to frame God as, right? That voice, that energy was like, okay, you're going to write this book. And I'm, at the time I was just trying to get my career started. But these ideas, these concepts, I would get these concepts. Okay, this is how to heal the body. This is my family's relatively large. I literally have 1,000 relatives on my father's side and my mother's side. So thousands of relatives that I know. And so, you grow up, and I had 35, 40 uncles and aunts. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna help my family out. I'm gonna take care of them with this philosophy of chiropractic. But as I got into it, I found out that there were more things that actually complete holistic health. So we talk about holistic health, what are things that come to mind if you think about holistic health?
Well, am I muted?
No, I can hear you.
Okay, I was trying to figure out if I was muted or not. The thing that comes to mind when you hear holistic health is like the woo-woo stuff,
Mm-hmm. Crystals
or like Chinese medicine or something, naturopathic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I think about holistic health, I think about the whole picture, right? What is health? And so these concepts just came to me. Well, health starts in the spirit, right? So if you don't have spiritual health, then it's going to impact your mental health. If you don't have mental health, it's going to impact your emotional health. So God kind of laid out these different layers of, okay, for a person to have comprehensive health, you got to take care of the whole picture, right? So I'm a chiropractor, but I'm a sports-based brain chiropractor. So when I treat a person, let's say you come in with a right shoulder problem, I instantly think, okay, how's your left ankle, right? Because your left ankle goes directly with your right shoulder. Okay. Right. Some folks don't realize that, but every time you walk, your left foot hits the ground. What does your right shoulder do? It moves, right? They're directly linked together. So if you have your left foot, which is the foundation, your feet are your foundation. If that's off, it impacts everything between, but it directly impacts your right shoulder, right? So from a comprehensive standpoint, if you're dealing with physical ailments, but what's going on with your spirit? What's going on with your mind? What's going on with your emotion, right? Because we've been taught that we're mind, body, spirit. But I tell folks you actually have 4 components, right? You have mind, body, spirit, but you have an emotional body as well, which a lot of folks don't think about, right? So I tell folks, okay, you get butterflies in your stomach, right? That's an emotion, but you literally feel that in your body, right? You get heartbroken. That's an emotion, but you literally feel that in your chest, right? That's how powerful the emotional body is. So really tapping into, okay, all of these components deal with physical health, which is kind of what I specialize in, but deal with physical health. And then when you deal with physical health, how deep do we go, right? Do we go to the cellular level? Now I'm dealing with the spine and we doing all these things, but then I started to understand, okay, how can we get deeper? Okay, let's go to the cells. Like, let's heal the cells first. And as we focus on cleaning the cells out, and then we heal the tissues, and then we heal the muscle, and then we heal, the bones, the brain. Like, we get into all these components that can maximize the health that an individual has. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how chiropractic, when I realized that, chiropractic is we always say a microcosm of holistic health of the entire body. So when I wrote that book, God kind of laid out, okay, this is the form, this is the system, right? We deal with the spiritual aspect. How's a person, do they have a relationship with God, right? We deal with the mental aspect. Do they have a relationship with themselves, right? We deal with the emotional component. How they with their emotions? Are they aware of their emotions? And then we can get into the physical aspects, which deals with, do you breathe properly? How's your nutrition? How's your water intake? Do you eat your water? All these different other elements that we can build on top of each other. And if you can kind of incorporate all of these things into your lifestyle, I tell folks, you're going to be like a walking God, right? You're going to have supreme health and maximize. They say we're supposed to live to about 120 years, right? Well, you can do that in a breeze if you incorporate all these different elements and understand them and balance them throughout your life.
Well, I'm definitely trying to get to 120.
Okay, well, that's what you're supposed to get, right? It says it in the Bible, and science has said that you're supposed to live at 120. So you're in Barbados, so how old do folks normally live in Barbados on average?
I think Barbados actually has the highest number of centenarians in the region.
Okay,
but a lot of people here. The best way to put it is the American diet has taken over, and the American way of doing things, big pharma has taken over. So since that has happened, you see a lot of people don't really even make it past 70,
Right.
So I'll be 38 this year.
Okay. Young man.
I look like 25 and I'm trying to keep that trend going,
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're on the right path. I mean, so you're in Barbados, so I'm sure you may have heard of Dr. Sebi. You familiar with Dr. Sebi? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of those things, those philosophies of Dr. Sebi are really mucus in the body, and just like you said, the SAD diet, which is kind of why I really got into really holistic care, because my focus when I was younger was more on athletics. Right. My goal was to, treat professional athletes and, maybe work for a sports team. And so I had to know the nutritional aspect anyway. Right. Because we're dealing with the top athletes in the world. So we got to know how to, fuel their body and all these things. But we were talking about something that changed my trajectory. Was I was working in Hilton Head, South Carolina, with a friend of mine, and this is really when God really started talking. I was about 25 at the time, and I had been practicing about maybe 4 or 5 years. And for whatever reason, like, it was just hammering me about chronic disease, like kind of you talking about how people are really sick, right? And I was starting to have, at that period, a lot of my family members die from heart attacks, strokes, cancer, and I was working in this region, and they had like an article about heart disease and how women, die more from heart disease, and especially African-American women. And my family is largely women, right? So that really hit me home for me, like, oh, wow, how can I help, my cousins, my aunts, and, my family avoid being the number one victim of heart disease. And so I was thinking about that. And then I had a client come in, and he was a physician as well. And he made a statement like, why, so many American women fat. And I hadn't really thought about it. But then I looked, and I just started doing like a unofficial survey, right? And I would just go somewhere, and I would just count 10 women. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10. Man, 7 of them are pretty big, 8 of them are pretty big. So even back then, I realized that 7 to 8, women were overweight. So I realized that, okay, it's the diet, right? It's the lifestyle. So I dove into what are the things that we can do from a lifestyle standpoint to reverse obesity, right? And if we reverse obesity, then we enhance the body's ability to function properly, the cells, and then we start going into all of the, Dr. Gerson is probably one of the first guys that kind of talked about plant-based approach back in the 20s. So I started really diving into that. And from sports, I kind of went more over to holistic. And that was kind of the shift from, okay, we can treat athletes, but the bigger picture is that it's far more people that are dealing with chronic diseases than athletes dealing with ACLs and shoulder, dislocated shoulder. So that kind of shifted my trajectory. So, that's at 25. So we're looking at almost 30 years of me really being holistically based. And this is where all the nutrition and all that aspect comes into it. So, yeah, you're right. The SAD diet and, the lifestyle. And I always tell folks, it's not about going outside in, it's about inside out, right? So they always teach you it's external, right? Oh, take this, do that. And I tell folks, once you realize the science, this is why we have side effects, right? Because you're putting stuff in your body that should never be in there. In the body, it's a friendly word to say side effects, but we're not going to go down that path. But yeah, we know that these things can be very, very potent and toxic to the body. So
yeah.
Now, what kind of lifestyle are you? More of a vegan or vegetarian?
I just, not even a few years ago, I keep saying it like it was yesterday or something, but this is about 8 years ago. I really made the shift onto no meat whatsoever.
Nice.
Yeah, before I was just, because I think around 2015, first of all, I never liked eating chicken. I never liked eating beef or anything like that. I just kind of did it because that was what we did in our family, And I started realizing that whenever I ate it, my stomach just didn't feel good. And so I started playing with it, and it took a few years before I realized, this can't be any good for me. If every time I eat it, I don't feel good, that's a sign. So I just gradually over time cut that out and then cut out fish and things like that. And I eat everything except for what people would consider meats. I still eat cheese sometimes. Not too often though, because there's something shady about cheese too. I really feel.
Oh yeah, well, cheese is any of the dairy products. We don't like to try to talk about industry because everybody has to make money. But yeah, I tell folks all of the dairy products are super highly processed, and cheese is super high in fat, cholesterol, and we're not going to run down that rabbit hole, but cheese is something that I definitely would tell folks, definitely limit that intake, really all of the dairy products. I really talk to folks that, if you tap in some of my books, we talk about protein. Protein's a key word, right? When I talk to the young people, you need protein. And I'm always like, okay, how much protein do you need? Because everybody says protein. It's kind of like we say we're programmed, right? Protein. And I tell folks, well, it used to be calcium. You drink milk because of calcium. That's what they told you, but not, when you do your research, you find out there's really no calcium in milk. Milk is pasteurized. So you go into that like, well, you're getting very little amount of calcium, if you get any at all. And it's high protein, right? But it's an animal protein. So I kind of went on a similar journey to you. Now, you said 2015. I think I really stopped eating major meats maybe in 2007, right? And it was because of my research, right? After I did my research and I got all the research and I realized, like we talk about SAD and why so many people were sick and all these things. And it was now we talked about the books. It was a great book I read back then called The China Study.
Oh, okay.
Are you familiar with The China Study?
Never heard of it, no.
All right, so the China Study is the largest study on diet in human history. So they literally studied, like, I want to say it's almost 1 million people, but hundreds of thousands of people in China, right? And they went to certain villages and they said, okay, this village eats a certain amount of meat. These are the type of issues that they deal with. This village doesn't eat much meat at all. These are the type of issues. And then they started studying on rats. in an experiment. Okay, we give this rat amount of animal protein and this rat amount of plant protein. And what they realize is that pretty much when your diet is 10% or more animal proteins, which is anything from an animal. So that's meat, I tell those chicken, beef, turkey, whatever, and eggs, cheese, milk, anything from an animal, very high in fat, very high in cholesterol, very low in nutrition, right? Increases your risk of every disease that we know of dramatically, right? Most Americans, their diet is 50+% animal proteins. So that's why the chronic disease is astronomical, right? And then when you do the history, now I'm a real, like I said, I'm a reader. So, I've read all the books on ancient history and ancient medicine. And so they show that, what's the point I was going to get to? That, when you eat certain foods, it accelerates how your body functions, right? You start to get all these diseases. And so that's kind of like why I moved into the plant-based stuff, because of research and me diving into the Dr. Gerson. And I don't know if I was in a Dr. Sebi at the time, but that's going to slow your aging down anyway. You not eating those foods are going to make you look, you're going to look like this. You might have a couple of little, some white, some nice little grays everywhere, but your face is pretty much going to be the same, because you're just not going to be taking in all those pesticides, those steroids. You're not going to be taking in all that fat. Right, you flood your body with nutrition every day. Your body is being fueled. So that's awesome. So the Chinese study is something that you should definitely check out, because it really kind of just showed that when you increase your intake of animal proteins, it makes you sicker. When you increase your intake of plant proteins, actually cures the body, actually kills disease. So that was kind of like the first thing when I started talking about these things with my family, and like I said, my family's from the South. So, we eat chicken every day.
Yeah.
That's and I always tell folks, like, folks say, oh, no, it's just genetic. It's hereditary. We have diabetes in the family, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. I said, no, it's not hereditary, because, genetically only 1% to 2% of things are hereditary that you get from your family. 98% is your lifestyle. I say we all eat the same thing at the cookout. Like, everybody's eating the same foods. Everybody's popping pills. Like, your lifestyle is why you're sick. It has nothing to do with, grandpa had, diabetes and all of these things. So once folks kind of wrap their heads around that and become more, and it's more common now, because I was just talking to somebody the other day about how I used to go to the cookout and I couldn't eat anything, right? Because I didn't eat chicken. I didn't eat pork. I didn't eat turkey. I didn't eat beef, and they were like, well, Dion, we don't have anything for you. But even in the salad, they would chop up ham and cheese, right? Which I eat cheese still, but, they would chop up ham. And I'd be like, well, there goes the salad. Can't eat that either. All right. So let me just have some bread. And if you go into bread, bread is a whole nother thing, wheat belly. Have you heard about the wheat belly?
No, I've never heard of that.
Okay, so that's another great book you can check out too, about the impacts of what bread does to the body. Bread is pretty much like a slice of bread. I think they said is equivalent to like 2 candy bars.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's something that I don't do much of either. Where the cheese and the bread thing comes in, where it's difficult, is kids, man. These freaking kids doing this pizza crap.
Pizza's delicious, my friend.
Yeah, that's where they'll get you. And I used to love like pasta and stuff like that, but eventually I just cut that stuff out of my diet too, because I don't like when you change the way that you eat and you start taking meat out, then your body becomes more sensitive to all the poisonous effects of everything else, right?
Exactly.
And the problem with people is that they just don't know that their ability to intuitively tap into, how the body reacts to the things they eat has been blunted from eating all this junk. So I just try to stay away from stuff like that. And you can tell who's on a plant-based diet and who's not, because they're like us. They have like smooth skin and, look very clean and very young. And you're like, oh, I'm 65. And you're like, you're how old? Yeah, I just don't eat meat. And like, there has to be
Yeah.
something to that. But the protein thing is something that drives me crazy because it's just been nonstop protein, protein, protein. And for the life of me, I don't know how it is so difficult for everyone else to not notice that it's obviously the people that sell you the protein that are paying for the studies that say protein is good. I mean, I have muscles. I know bodybuilders that like, I mean, I used to be really fat too at one point too. I think I've told this story on the show before. And I lost like 100 and something pounds, 110 pounds or something like that in a
Oh,
year.
wow. Nice.
And a lot of that was just changing diet and also just being very aware of how things made me feel. And I noticed all the things that made me feel like crap were the things that were making me put on weight or keep weight on my body, you know? And
Yes.
it's just kind of weird. The protein stuff, like protein powders and stuff like that, made me feel ill. So,
Yes.
you know, you start working out, and the first thing that everybody tells you is you got to get more protein, right? Because you got to build muscle. If you don't eat protein, you're not going to have muscles for somehow. And then I guess, you know, it's one of those things where it's like you're in a state of crisis. You don't know where to turn. You know that something's wrong out there in the world, and you pray about it and you ask for help, and then all of a sudden the right person shows up. So I have a friend of mine who actually passed away, was a great mentor to me and actually put me on this spiritual path. She just found me on Facebook, and she was a fitness trainer, owned a gym. Her best friend and roommate was a pro bodybuilder. And they basically were telling me all the stuff that went against the grain of the typical narrative, which is what you would find on the internet right now. Every influencer is like, you got to have, you know, a certain amount of protein per body weight, or you can't build muscle. And they were like, no, you know, 75% of your plate at least should be vegetables. And, you know, the first thing that she said to me that blew my mind was like, you know, fruit and vegetables, the water in the fruit and vegetables, your muscles would absorb that and actually get bigger. They'll actually expand and grow much faster than if you ate a bunch of meat and stuff like that. So she's like, don't worry about protein, you know? And when I tell you she had an incredible body, like lines on lines, just insanely sculpted. And I was like, okay, well, if you look like that and that's what you're saying, then you must know what's going on, right? So that just kind of woke me up a long time ago. And that must have been about over 20 years ago that she first said that. And I think everything spiraled from there. My relationship with meat and stuff spiraled from there.
Good. Yeah. And that's what happens, right? When we're going to always say God, but where we want to look at it, the consciousness always puts these individuals, as you planted that seed that you saw something wasn't right, plant that seed, put this person in your life to kind of educate you. And that's kind of what I tell like the young kids. I just had a conversation with one of the young kids working in the office, and I was like, yeah, you're doing protein. Why? Oh, they don't even know why, right? Because we talking about the hive mind, the collective mindset, right? What he said, protein and protein powders, it's an ingredient in protein powders that's the most cancerous causing agent that we know of, called casein, but they're flooding their bodies with protein. Then I was telling him, and he's an overweight kid, he's young, that's like 27. And I'm like, wait, did you know that after 10% of your calories is protein, it turns to fat? It becomes toxic in the body. What kind of protein are you eating? Like they say protein, but they don't even understand. And a lot of folks, tapping in what you said, don't know that protein philosophy is based on rats from the 70s. It's not even based on a real study. Like it's not even a real study. So now I tell folks that, well, you get protein. Proteins are amino acids. You get protein from a potato chip. You're just eating chips. You get protein from a chip. You get protein from a cookie. right? What quality of protein are you doing? The plant-based proteins are superior, right? Fruits and vegetables. And I really just realized recently, probably in the last 5 to 10 years, that, we were already taught fruits and vegetables, and it's always like vegetables to fruits, but it's actually the opposite. We actually should eat more fruits. So it should be a 4-to-1 ratio of fruits than vegetables, which I didn't know for many, many years. So I've kind of shifted that though. So I just wanted to share that with your audience, is that we're actually foodivores, right? And so when you eat, what is the most perfect food for a human? Well, something that they can take off a tree and eat without having to cook.
Yeah, there's
right?
people that argue the narrative about the hunter-gatherer thing. And it's like, well, you weren't always able to find food. So what do you think they were snacking on?
Well, that's not even based in history. So I always tell folks that hunter-gatherer thing, that's like a glorified kind of, we're trying to still talk about caveman stuff. I said, really, eating meat started after World War II. This is when we really started eating meat. When they came back from World War II, the meat industry exploded. That's why if you look at disease in America in 1900, there was no heart disease, there was no cancer, there was no strokes. There were none of these things because 95% of the population ate vegetables and stuff they grew on the farm. They didn't eat meat, right? When you look at the pictures of like the royalty from the 1600s, Henry VIII was an obese guy where everybody else was skinny. Why? Because he ate meat. Everybody else ate whatever they grew in the field, right? My family's from the South. They pretty much they ate a little bit of meat, but the plate was pretty much vegetables and beans and, corn and peas, right? So the whole narrative that we've been eating meat since the dawn of time, that's not even true, right? That, like I tell folks, we didn't even start eating meat until the mid 40s, 50s. Yeah,
it's true. There was no butcher here in Barbados until about 1930 something. And
wow.
If you had meat, it was because you raised stuff on your own and you killed it, and you cooked it, right? But I was talking to my aunt who is 84, and she was talking about when she was growing up, if you had meat, it was a luxury, and it was probably something like the size of your thumb on your plate. And that was it. Everything else was vegetables, or potatoes, sweet potatoes, and like ground provisions is what they call it.
Exactly.
And I realized on my healing journey that I just need to go back to the way that my ancestors ate. And I realized that what they ate was things like, in Barbados, so you have the breadfruit, or you have sweet potatoes, these things that are kind of like sweet potatoes called eddos. You have yams.
Yes.
Lots of yellow potatoes. And then you have the other stuff like broccoli and, cabbage and all kinds of stuff like that, right? And then those were the staples. And so I just started going that way. And I realized as soon as I started going that way, things changed. Even my consciousness started to change. And then that was when I started questioning things like caffeine, et cetera. Like, okay, you know what? It's definitely poison.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And tapping into that point, you just made me think of something. So we say consciousness change when you change your diet, right? So I would tell folks like, you're expecting to get life from death, right? The meat is dead, right? The meat is dead. So you're trying to get life, but the fruit is alive. The vegetable is alive. It's living entities in the fruits, the phytonutrients. So this is why people die early, right? Because you've been consuming death. And we talk about the proteins, right? So, you get protein from chicken. So I always give them this analogy, my clients. I say, okay, you're getting proteins from chicken, but the chicken already used the protein up for itself. It's like you got a new shirt, right, from your older brother. It's new to you, but it's an old shirt. That's what you're consuming. That's the protein. You're getting old protein and you're getting, 10% of the protein you're supposed to get. Chicken already used the protein for its own body, for its own energy source, right? The cow's already used the protein for its own energy. You're getting secondhand, low quality proteins when you can just get the protein from the source where they got it from, which is the plant, So I try to share these concepts in my books, and I try to share these concepts with my clients. And those who, I always tell folks, I do transformation. I say, okay, we can help you lose weight, but it's a lifestyle, right? It's about you really 9% of the weight loss, the fat loss you're going to get is from changing your diet. You do not have to go to the gym to lose whatever amount of weight you're trying to lose, right? Like you lost 100 pounds in a year, right? Yeah. And that's because you changed your lifestyle, not because you went to the gym 5-6 times a day and for 5-6 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the major thing. I don't know. It's all funny, and people are going to do whatever they want to do, I guess. They're going to think that we're crazy vegans for saying what we're saying.
I'm a pescatarian personally, so I eat seafood. But I don't, I eat, fish maybe 2 or 3 times a week, so I didn't want to be too extreme with it. I told myself when I made that shift, but I understand folks who don't eat meat at all, so because of that, you age far slower than all these people who are just eating meat. And it's funny how it shifted real quick. I mean, like I said, I started talking about this stuff in 2012, plant-based and, intermittent fasting. And, my relatives were looking at me like, what is going on with this guy? He went to school and he's crazy right now. But now it's very common. And, we go to the cookout now and then be like, oh, well, we have to have food for some people don't eat meat. But when I said it 10 years ago, they were like, oh, you don't eat meat. You don't eat chicken. I mean, huh? Like that doesn't what? But now it's and we talk about the collective consciousness is starting to shift. And we'll talk about how the body, they say the world is going to light. I always tell folks, I don't really think of the world linearly so much, right? But just consciousness is that folks are starting to remember, right? Like you said, how your family ate, the ancients. It's really how your aunt ate, right? So it's not even a generation ago, right? They ate like that when they were children. My relatives ate like that. My dad ate like that when he was a kid, right? Mm-hmm. Fruits and vegetables. He didn't eat a bunch of meat. So I tell folks, it's industry kind of dictates a lot of these narratives that we get. And if you can kind of get through all of the static, you can kind of get back to, what God has us basically laid out for us. Yeah, in the Bible and all these other philosophies.
Yeah, another thing I like to look at is results. My mother started getting sick around age 30, and thyroid issues and all this stuff. And I just kind of saw that, and I was like, "Whatever it is you're doing, I'm not going to do it." And I realized that everybody in my family that is sick, I look at their diet. They're all eating the same thing: eggs for breakfast, ham for breakfast, crackers, bread. What is that going to get you? Beef was a big thing. My grandfather loved life more than anybody else, and he died at 87 years old. And this is about 20 something years ago that he died. But he just loved ham and beef and stuff like that. He loved to eat a bunch of stuff like that. Ice cream was one of his favorite treats. I was like, man, all that stuff has to go from my diet if I'm going to make it longer than any of them,
Yeah.
They talk like getting old and having aches and pains is a rite of passage. Like that's supposed to happen, and it just doesn't seem normal to me.
It's not normal, and you're right. Like I get folks coming in all the time, young folks, 65, 67. Oh, it's age. You get older, and I tell them, listen, you can be 87, no pain. Pain is not normal, right? Pain is your check engine light, right? This is what I tell my clients. Pain is your check engine light. It's your fire alarm. It's saying, Jihan, something's not right. Please do something, change something, get it checked out. It is your body talking to you. Right. Mm-hmm. It is your intuition letting you know. It's your inner knowing letting you know something's not right. Do something, change something. Look at what's happening. Like you said, you ate and you became aware that when I eat these foods, I don't feel good. Right. And we're not even talking about the energetic aspect of it. Right. The energy of the food. right? The conditions. Now, I don't know about in Barbados, but the food in America, like I tell folks, you're not just getting, like we said, all the preservatives, all the steroids, all the whatever. You're getting the anxiety of the animal, right? Mm-hmm. The environment, like the energetic imprint of the, of the environment that it was raised in. You're consuming that as well. Right. Mm-hmm. On top of all the other stuff that you get from, media, social media and regular media. And this is what's stripping years and life and vitality from you as well. Right. So all of these components, when we say holistic, can you be aware of all these things? And can you, like I like to tell, like, do a news fast. Right. Let's cut down looking at the news. And, you get your older folks are like, well, I have to know what's going on. Like, you got to know that the bank was robbed. Like, you don't need to know that. Like, let's just tap into some things that really bring life to your body and your world, and not so much, chaos, which contributes to that. Stress increases your risk of everything. Right. And that could be internal stress. That could be external stress.
Yeah, well, one more point I'll add in here before we move on. As a chiropractor, you can appreciate this. So when I was about 14 years old, I fractured my ankle, and the doctor was like, "Oh, this will hurt you for the rest of your life." And I guess I was a very defiant teenager, so I kind of looked down and was like, "Do you even know what you're talking about? Like, how is that even possible? What does that mean? This is gonna hurt for the rest of my life?" So what I realized is that it did hurt until I stopped eating garbage. And when I changed my diet, then there was no symptoms. You know how people talk about when it gets cold and it rains and stuff, they get pains where they've broken something or whatever like that. That used to happen. I changed my diet. Doesn't happen anymore. It's like I have a brand new ankle. And so I just attribute lifestyle to the main thing where people fall down, really. Like, you can look at a person and they'll come to you with like all these different limitations, and maybe they're spiritually bankrupt or whatever, but then you look at what's really behind the scenes, and it's what they're eating or what they're consuming from TV and the internet and stuff that is their biggest obstacle. So I am anti-television and anti-social media and things like that.
Good for you. And this is why you have such a great spirit, right? And like you just said, when people say things like, that's an issue that, I have with the medical industry, that they tell folks that you're going to be not well, right? You're only going to live 10 more years. Like you're only going to make it. Like, how can you sit here and tell someone, like, now you're planting a suggestion, right? You're casting a spell over someone. Oh, you're going to have, or you're 14 years old. Oh, you're going to have pain for the rest of your life. Like, what is that to tell somebody? Now, if he'd have told you, hey, don't worry about it. The pain will go away in 3 weeks. Guess what? The pain would have went away in 3 weeks. Right. So I don't even understand sometimes the philosophy of telling folks, like, we had my grandmother lived to 91, but she had an issue. I think she had a heart attack at 71. And the doctor was like, well, she lived a life. She lived a great life. And, we're going to pull the plug. And we were like, okay, this doctor right here, we put him on someone else. Right. And she lived another 20 years. Right. Yeah. So I try to tell folks, like, these are just suggestions. Understand that that's some folks kind of have the, a mindset that, oh, there's nothing you can do. And I just want to share this with the audience as well, is that when you go to the, traditional medicine, which is not really traditional, is really like 100 years old, right? Traditional is kind of like what your ancestors or were doing hundreds and thousands of years ago. Right. A lot of folks, like, I'm a chiropractor, they don't know that chiropractic is literally like acupuncture. It's thousands of years old. They've been doing, Hippocrates is the father of modern medicine, right? Doctors take the Hippocratic oath. Well, Hippocrates said, look to the spine for the cause of disease. He already told you that the spine is super important to the overall health of the body, right? So this is ancient science, ancient health knowledge, but modern medicine, like we said, is pop a pill, here's an injection. So the point I was getting into is when a medical doctor tells you there's nothing we can do, I'll say, okay, well, they told you there's nothing they can do. What does that mean? Nothing they can do with a pill, injection, surgery, right? They're not saying you can't go to a chiropractor, TCM, holistic doctor, herbalist. They're not saying that. They're just saying that they don't have a pill, injection, or surgery that they know of that can help your situation. So I always like to let folks know that they're not telling you there's nothing you can do. They're just telling you there's nothing they can do with what the tools that they have at their disposal.
Yeah, that has always bothered me. Because it's willful ignorance is what it is. How do you call yourself a doctor and you only know what you've been told? You don't know anything else other than that. In your experience with working with people, you've never questioned the narrative. And, because I figure if you have a problem and you're trying to solve it, you're going to look in any direction that could be a potential solution to learn something in the process. So it's like, how are you practicing medicine, but you haven't learned anything? Like your wisdom hasn't increased? What is going on there? That is just very strange to me. Anyway, with that, we're going to talk about limitations that people put on themselves. Like, I got your email, and there was something about how people feel overwhelmed by the state of the world. Well, what is the state of the world? I mean, from where I'm sitting, it looks like everything is going to hell in a handbasket because people want change, but they don't know how to go about implementing change in their own lives. They kind of expect that the rest of the world is just going to change automatically, and things are going to get better. And I just don't see it that way. Like when I ask people about their circumstances and stuff when they come to me and they're like, oh, woe is me. And I'm like, well, if you look at it that way all the time, when is it ever going to change?
Exactly. I mean, the thing is that most people get external stimuli, right? So I tell folks, you could be I would say, folks, you can have a mental prison, right? Or you can have a mental paradise. The choice is yours, right? Henry Ford said, if you think you can do it or you think you can't do it, you're right. Right. So you decide what life. So this, we kind of talk about, like, my whole thing is Christ consciousness timeline, right? How do you tap into your Christ consciousness timeline, which is your best version? So where you convict and commit yourself to living there mentally. So it's a journey inside, which most people don't take, right? Most people don't go. We like to say the hero's journey. Most people say, like you said, you can't look in the mirror and think the image is going to change. The mirror is not going to smile at you unless you smile, right? So if you're saying woe is me, then guess what? It's woe is me. I have friends, and we talk positive, but then they say, well, I hope. Tomorrow, I'm sure something's going to happen. I get clients that come in, and every time I see them, they're young folks, every time I see them, over the weekend, I had to, play with the dog and I was bent over. Oh, my back is horrible. So this is the reality that you created because you cast a spell on yourself. Like, a lot of folks don't realize the words and thoughts create their reality. So it's a study of Dr. Emoto. You ever seen the crystal, the frozen water experiments of Doc? All right. Yeah. So your words and your thoughts create reality, right? So if you're going to tell yourself that something's going to go wrong, guess what? Something's going to go wrong, right? If you're going to tell yourself that something's going to go right and you believe it, guess what? Something's going to go right. Right. So we kind of get bombarded. Like I tell folks, and I don't know if we're going to touch on my project, but, I have a thing called Project Light Body 1111. Is basically you taking an internal journey for 1111 days. And every day you're doing, universal laws. You're learning about hermetic principles. You're applying these things. You're getting steps on what they are. And it starts to change your DNA. Right. It starts to change your energetic body. It starts to change your emotional body. Right? Your physical body, like you change your lifestyle. So your body changed, but your mind changed. Your emotions change, your energy changed, right? They're all combined. And we get overwhelmed because we have, like in the movie Matrix, we haven't freed our mind, right? We're kind of whatever they tell us, We believe, like I said, I went to Catholic school, so there's a lot of indoctrination in the Catholicism, right? In Catholicism. So you can get kind of caught up in that in any religion, right? You know, whatever church you go to or whatever, you know, they have, like I'm here and it's a lot of, you know, Islamic faith, right? But they're indoctrinated and they have a certain kind of belief in, you know, it's like, oh, you know, you can't touch the skin. Oh, you know, we gotta cover up. And so because of that programming, you get overwhelmed. And now you guys get a lot of US news. You get a lot of that World War III and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I tell folks like, yeah, you know, if you know the history, like you tap into the history of the world, every 99 year. So we said, you know, Christ was born in 0 and then died at 33 and then every 99 years. So 99, 199, 299, 399, 499, 1999. They said that it was going to be Armageddon. Every 99 in every century, they thought the world was going to end. So I tell folks, well, we're still here and we'll still be here if you understand it. We're not going anywhere. It's not going to be a war. And I tell folks all the time, like, well, we've been at war since I was in grade school. When we supposed to go to World War III with the Russians in 82? I don't know. Like every 3 years, we're going to war with somebody, right? And this is a part of the control system as well, right? If we can keep you kind of caught up on the external and do the internal journey, right? And so you become overwhelmed with all of the noise and all this stuff that they're giving you instead of finding inner peace, right? Mm-hmm. Going inside, realizing like, okay, I tell folks if, you know, they were telling me, you know, they'd come to the office, oh, did you hear that, you know, such and such in World War III? And I was like, well, I don't know anything about that. What's going to happen is I'm going to be sleeping in my house and I'm going to see a flash and then I'm just going to wake up in another reality. That's what's going to happen. And I'm fine with that. You know, I'm not going to sit here and worry and stress over these things. And I think because of stress, you know, mental, spiritual, emotional, it kind of keeps us imprisoned, right? In that overwhelming feeling that what can I do? Well, what you can do is find out who you are, right? Become more conscious, become more aware, right? See what your vibration is, right? Your frequency. Once you change your vibration, your frequency, you start to dictate the reality that you live in. Right? Do you talk success? Like you said, I'm in Singapore. Why? Because for whatever reason, when I was growing, like your age, 38, 35, 38, 40, I will always tell folks, yeah, in my 50s, you know, I'm going to live overseas. And this was a statement I would just make. I'm going to live overseas in my 50s. Like, and at literally 50 years old, I got the opportunity to move overseas. Mm-hmm. Right? Because that was just something that I knew intuitively, but I would always make that statement, right? And so the words we say create our reality. Now, this is a good, when I talk about words and thoughts, they have an energetic imprint, right? Words have an energetic imprint. So for every negative statement, and this is why so many of us live in trauma, right? For every negative statement, it takes 18 positive statements to neutralize that one statement. So if you said to yourself, I'm so dumb. Well, now it has to take 18 positive statements to yourself to neutralize that one statement that you said to yourself, let alone if somebody else said it to you. Right? Like we have a certain lifestyle. Somebody like Dion, Dr. Dion's weird. Like, you know, if I didn't talk to myself in a positive manner and understood like, oh, okay, well, you know, that's an opinion and it doesn't matter to me. So detachment is also super important, right? Learning how to detach from a lot of these comments, these circumstances, this information that we've been fed.
Yeah. So we're running out of time here, but I would love for you to talk to me a little bit more about Project Lightbody. And I believe there's a manifestation formula that you have as well.
Yeah. So Project Lightbody is a project that I put together, and it's an individual project, but I'm actually going to create a video diary of me. Pretty much, you know, I wrote a book. So pretty much going through the book, I put together the top, in my opinion, 111 universal laws, right? Of self-mastery, personal empowerment, right? Mastering manifestation and spiritual enlightenment, right? So I'm going to go through that every day. And in each law, it's like 5 practical steps, like 5 key components to to each one, right? So we talk about how do we become less overwhelmed. Well, we have to learn about who we are. And these universal laws are immutable, meaning that just like gravity, right? You jump off a building, guess what? You hit the ground, right? So if you apply these laws, they actually transmute who you are, right? And this is where we start to tap into Christ consciousness, and we start to create the life of our dream, right? We co-create it. We become masters of our ship instead of kind of just being on the ocean with no guidance and just in turbulence, right? We can say, okay, we're going to the island, we're going to Barbados, right? We're going this way. And so that's what Project Like Body is. It's people who want to go on their own journey. Like, I'm not here to teach, I'm just here to be, I like to tell my folks, I'm a master student servant. Right. So I'm constantly learning every day. I pretty much download every day now. But basically, Project Like Body is, okay, commit to the next 111 days, which is basically 3 years, right, of every day tapping into these universal laws, these hermetic principles, right, these ancient, you can do Bible verses or whatever. They all kind of say the same thing, right, that you are God, right, that you're a fragment of God, and that anything that you want, you can have, right? So that's kind of what it is. And it gets even deeper than, we want to create literally heaven on earth, and we're gonna add that component to creating this, this community. So the goal is to get at least 111.1 million people to say, you know what, hey, I see that something's not right. I feel something's not right. I'm ready to master self, to gain self-mastery. I'm ready to figure out my soul's mission, right? Live my divine purpose. Because we're all here for a reason, right? We all manifested right now to live the best life that we want to. Now, are we going to consciously do that, or are we going to be unconscious, right? So we want folks to be conscious, and we want it to be Christ consciousness. So that project is about Christ consciousness awakening, and basically you tapping into the power that, you were given to remember who and what you are, and to maximize all of the abilities that God gave you, right, to be the best version of yourself.
All right. Well, tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, right now, we're doing, I'm really doing a real personal thing. So we're really trying to just see if anybody kind of resonates with this message, shoot me an email. And basically what we'll do is we'll set up a private consultation or a private conversation to kind of feel like where you are. If you feel like, okay, I want someone to just kind of help me find who I am, have a conversation, see how we can align. And then, we get all of the, we call it the what if manifestation, because pretty much I just upgraded. We're doing a overhaul of everything online. So that should be up in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So right now, anybody who wants to reach me, they can always reach me at my email, drdionpresents@gmail. So that's DRDIONPRESENTS@gmail. Shoot me an email if you're interested in doing a consultation. We'll sit down, schedule something, and to see how we can help you out. Get you on this journey to fulfilling your divine purpose.
All right, Dr. Dion, thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate the opportunity to share, man. Take care. Be blessed.
Awesome. You too.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your conscious of the brain to get in the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality, whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms, or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences.
experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean? You know, all the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.